Good morning. It's Tuesday, March 12th, 2019. The House meets today for morning hour at 10 a.m. Eastern. The Senate will also reconvene at 10 a.m. and we're with you for the next 3 hours. On the Washington Journal, we begin this morning hearing the reaction of Democrats to Speaker Nancy Pelosi's latest comments opposing efforts to impeach President Trump. Pelosi's interview with the Washington Post drew differing reactions yesterday from liberal and moderate members of her party on Capitol Hill. Today, we want to hear what Democrats around the country think. If you're a Democrat in the Eastern or Central time zones, the phone number this morning, 202-748-8000. If you're a Democrat in the Mountain or Pacific time zones, the number is 202-748-8001. You can also catch up with us on social media. On Twitter, it's at CSpanWJ. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/CSpan. And a very good Tuesday morning to you. We're hearing from Democrats only in just this first 30 minutes of the Washington Journal today. Here's the key quote from that interview that Speaker Nancy Pelosi had with the Washington Post magazine. "I'm not for impeachment," she said in a March 6th interview. "I've been thinking about this. Impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country and he's just not worth it." There's the front page story in today's Washington Post. Nancy Pelosi, in that wide-ranging interview with the Washington Post magazine, had plenty more to say on a variety of topics, but also spoke more about President Trump. Here's more from that interview. Pelosi said that she does not believe that President Trump is up to the job of running the country. Asked whether he was fit to be president, she countered, "Are we talking ethically, intellectually, politically? What are we talking here?" And when the reporter said all of the above, she said he was not. "All of the above? No, I don't think he is," she said. "I mean, ethically unfit, intellectually unfit, curiosity-wise unfit. No, I don't think he's fit to be president of the United States." Those comments from Nancy Pelosi, especially the ones about impeachment, have infuriated some on the left, including Tom Steyer, the billionaire Democratic activist who has been pushing an effort to impeach President Trump, tweeted his response yesterday. He said, quoting her, "He's not worth it. Is defending our legal system worth it? Is holding the president accountable worth it? Is doing the right thing worth it? Or shall America just stop fighting for our principles and do what's politically convenient?" For the most part, Nancy Pelosi's leadership team backing her in her comments yesterday about impeachment. Here's a few of the comments from some members of her leadership team. Manu Raju is a CNN reporter quoting House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff yesterday, saying, "If the evidence isn't sufficient to win bipartisan support for this, putting the country through a failed impeachment isn't a good idea." Schiff added, "I think given how polarized the country is right now and given how the Republican members of Congress have prostrated themselves right now in front of the president, in the absence of very graphic evidence, it would be difficult to get the support of the Senate." And one more quote yesterday, Fox News Capitol Hill reporter Chad Pergram quoting Elijah Cummings, the head of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, saying, "I support Pelosi. I support the Speaker." Just some of the reaction yesterday after that interview with the Washington Post magazine came out. We want to hear from just Democrats around the country on phone lines split by region. If you're a Democrat in the Eastern or Central time zones, it's 202-748-8000. If you're a Democrat in the Mountain or Pacific time zones, it's 202-748-8001. Janet's up first, Tacoma, Washington. Go ahead.
I think that maybe Nancy Pelosi thinks that we might not be able to get enough Republican votes to get him impeached. I don't know if he should be, but anyhow, I don't think he should be able to run the next time, because I think that he could cause our country a lot of trouble with Russia and the way he has done so much crime. He can't even be served at a bank, so he's illegal as everything. He might even supposed to be going to jail, and he should probably. And he doesn't even know what's going on in his own country. He's worried about the other countries when he doesn't even know that there are police on every force in the United States selling drugs. And it could have been stopped a long time ago, but they didn't want to stop it because they won the money for it. And if he knew it, maybe he'd try to stop it. I don't even think
Janet,
he knows it.
Do you want Democrats in Congress to go forward with impeachment?
What did you say?
Do you want Democrats in Congress to go forward with impeachment? Are you disappointed in this statement by Nancy Pelosi yesterday? Because it sounds like you support impeachment.
I think if he got impeached, it would be only right. But the is I think we need some Republican votes, and we have to make sure first if we got the Republican votes in order to impeach him.
Got your point, Janet. Heading down the West Coast from Washington to California, Gil is waiting. Gil, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, C-SPAN, for what you do. I'm a lifelong Blue Dog Democrat, which means I'm a conservative Democrat. And I am completely embarrassed by what has happened with my party. Blue Dog Democrats used to be a very strong a part of the party, and I still think there are some there, but they're cowards. And they won't say anything. They won't stand up. If there was proof that President Trump has committed impeachable acts, then I'm behind that. I voted for Donald Trump. And again, I'm a lifelong Democrat. But there is no proof. There is just talk. There is innuendo and supposition. And for my party to stand up in the in the Congress and speak of impeachment. If you listen to Representative Al Green from Texas, it was a few months back, list the number of things that Donald Trump has done that are impeachable. He literally spoke about him hurting people's feelings as an impeachable act. This is an absolute embarrassment to my party and where it's going with the Progressive Socialists. And they need to leave the party and start their own party because they're destroying a great party in this country. And all of this is just talk, is supposition and innuendo without any proof. Now, if there was, I would be the first in line to say impeach the man.
Gil, you talk about Congressman Al Green. Stick around this morning. He's going to be joining our program and taking calls from viewers starting in about 25 minutes this morning. He'll be here at the bottom of the hour at 7:30 to talk more about this topic. But for right now, we just are hearing from Democrats from around the country. Your reaction to Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying yesterday she's not for impeachment. Earl in Brooklyn, New York, go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead, Earl.
Yes, my name is Mickey.
Mickey,
I'm
go
speaking
ahead.
about, I can understand Nancy Pelosi distancing herself from the impeachment process at present because she has other things to do, I'm sure. You have other committees that are going to be taking up all the air out of the room in terms of moving in certain different directions in order to close in on the president-elect. Because in my opinion, he has done some impeachable things that really need to be looked into, aside from his family enriching themselves on the backs of America and its citizens. I don't have much else to say on it, but the fact of the matter is I'm first time looking at C-SPAN this early in the morning because I have to walk my baby to a babysitter, and I'm really enjoying this. And I'm going to be on this station for quite some time now.
Appreciate that, Earl. Just in time for our 40th anniversary coming up next week here at C-SPAN. Thanks for joining in. Hope you continue to do it. Mitchell is in New Jersey. You're up next. Go ahead.
Good morning. My feeling is that Nancy Pelosi is completely correct on this. The Democrats are never going to get the 67 votes needed to remove Trump in the Senate. I don't think this is a matter of there are no grounds for impeachment. I think you can make a clear case for obstruction of justice and also for campaign finance abuse, which is a felony. But if you don't get the 67 votes in the Senate, and you won't, because you're nowhere near there, and the Republicans have shown no interest whatsoever in protecting the country against this president. So I think it's just a complete waste of time. And I think that Trump would just be gloating and tweeting and, we'd never hear the end of it once he won the conviction when the trial got over to the Senate.
Mitchell in New Jersey this morning. You can keep calling in. Democrats only in just this first half hour. Democrats in the Eastern or Central time zones, 202-748-8000. If you're a Democrat in the Mountain or Pacific time zones, 202-748-8001. This interview with the Washington Post magazine, it took place back on March 6th. It was published yesterday online. Nancy Pelosi saying, "I'm not for impeachment," and immediately afterwards, members of the Capitol Hill press corps trying to catch up with Nancy Pelosi to talk more about it. A tweet from Bo Erickson of CBS News catching up with Nancy Pelosi for just a few seconds before she got in an elevator yesterday.
I just don't believe in it. They wanted me to impeach President Bush for the Iraq War. I didn't believe in it then. I don't believe in it now. It divides the country unless there's some conclusive evidence that takes us to that place. Thank you.
Thank you. CBS News' Bo Erickson tweeting out that clip yesterday. Here's some of the reaction to the statements by Nancy Pelosi in that Washington Post magazine article from Facebook and Twitter this morning. Roger writing in, calling her a voice of someone that values the country more than political expediency. Angie saying she's lost her mind. No more Team Nancy for me. Glynis saying she loves it. She's very shrewd. I trust her instincts. Laurel saying she has mixed emotions. I want President Trump impeached, but not if he will end up like Clinton with increased popularity and winning a second term. Brett saying, I think she's right. It will hurt Trump's ego more if the people remove him from office. And one more from Bill King this morning. On this, Pelosi is correct. It's not worth the trouble with Republicans in control of the Senate. There's no chance of a conviction, no matter the charges. Talking to Democrats only for just the next 15 minutes or so this morning, getting your reaction. Sandra waiting in Paris, Kentucky. Go ahead.
Hey.
Go ahead, Sandra.
The last gentleman sounded to me where I am. When I listened to the fellow who said he was a blue dog Democrat, it sounded to me like he was like a Republican. I don't think I agree with the last caller. We can't. What's the point of trying to impeach him if there are no votes? The Senate has done no oversight at all, and I'm glad the Democrats are doing it. I think we have to be very careful on getting too many investigations going. Take the ones that are the most fruitful, the ones that you can prove. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. I can't stand Donald Trump. I'm embarrassed to come from Kentucky. I don't live in Kentucky. I actually moved here 15 years ago. We have a thoroughbred farm. I was brought up in the D.C. area, so I'm not really Kentuckian. And it's very difficult for me for these people around here. I think some of the problem, like where I am, the base, the Trump supporters are non-global, uneducated, do not have an appreciation, and that's not fair. I don't mean I'm going to get killed. Some, where I am, they don't have an appreciation for some of the specifics, for the global implications, for the ramifications. I mean, my concern particularly, which you have addressed a little bit but not a lot, is Trump being held by the short hairs of Putin. He really seems to be controlled. I suspect there's a lot of money laundering that went on, and that Putin and Russia and the oligarchs have given Donald Trump a lot of money, and in exchange for this, I think they really have him by the nuts, and I don't think he can do what he needs to do for our country.
Sandra, what's your expectation for the Mueller report? Expected perhaps any time at this point. What are you expecting to find in it?
I think Robert Mueller is a very brilliant man. I think he dots every I and crosses every T. And one day I'll think it's going to blast Trump. It's going to lay out the yellow brick road right to the White House and show everything he did. And the next day you listen to a commentator who goes, oh, they're spilling, they're leaking it. There's nothing more going to come out that we know most of it. To me, I hope that it becomes his Watergate. I hope the Mueller report without, I mean, we get to see it and what happened. I think somehow it will get leaked. But I hope that it dots every I, crosses every T, and makes it so clear that he is tied to Russia, that he has perjured himself, that he has benefited himself at the mercy of our. I mean, Donald Trump's all about the money. He doesn't. I'm sorry. I really don't think he cares about America. I think he cares about himself, his family, and the money.
That's Sandra in Kentucky this morning. The front page of USA Today focusing on what happens after Robert Mueller finishes his report. We expect the full report as the headline. Lawmakers demand Mueller deliver his all. The story noting what happens next, according to Justice Department procedure, after Robert Mueller finishes his report. The first move belongs to Mueller's boss. They write Attorney General William Barr. He must decide how much of Mueller's final report will become public. Justice Department rules say that special counsel must give Barr a confidential report when he's done explaining why he charged some people and not others. Barr said he will determine how much of Mueller's work Congress sees. And then, of course, it would be up to Congress from there. Mary Grace is waiting in Green Cove Springs, Florida. Good morning. You're next.
Oh, good morning. I agree with Nancy Pelosi in the fact that we don't want to divide our country, but I also have mixed feelings about it because I feel like the Trump administration has been getting away with so many things that we wouldn't, as a regular citizen, would not be able to get away with. And I do agree that we need to have the Mueller report before we make any decisions. So that's where I'm at with that. And I'm just hoping for the best. And I do want President Trump to be put in prison with the rest of his family.
That's Mary Grace this morning. Chris is next in Plano, Texas. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well.
So I was troubled yesterday by Nancy Pelosi's bipartisan condition because I feel that her bipartisan precondition for impeachment basically translates to the president can break whatever law he wants in this current political climate, because I don't really have any faith that the Republicans are going to view anything as rising to overwhelming levels of evidence of a crime. And I think that's a bad precedent, and I think that's bad for the rule of law. And going a little bit further, I think that Ms. Pelosi seems to misunderstand impeachment purely as a political mechanism and not as a judicial mechanism that's handled by Congress. And yes, it has an inherently political component to it, but it's more than just a political exercise. This is how Congress oversees the executive branch's execution of the laws that they created. And one last thought on that is that the executive branch is subject to impeachment broadly. It's not just about the president. So creating these sorts of preconditions for impeachment, it wouldn't just apply to the president. It would apply to the vice president. It would apply to Secretary Nielsen. It would apply to any other member of the administration. I think that this is dangerous, and I think that we should stick to our guns on this.
Chris, before you go, stick around on the concern you have about the bipartisan issue when it comes to removing a president, and when it comes to purely the votes that would be needed to do that. It would have to be bipartisan, considering how many votes that process requires in the Senate. Today's Washington Times running through the impeachment process, reminding folks that impeachment, which requires only a majority vote in the House, which Democrats have, is sort of an indictment. A president who has been impeached must then be tried in the Senate, which of course is still under Republican control, and it takes a 2/3 majority vote to remove a president from office. Chris, your thoughts on making it to that 2/3 majority vote?
Yeah, so I think it's a multi-phase process, like a trial. So when you do impeachment and you vote to impeach, we then move into an informing the public process. And one of the things we had during Bill Clinton's 1996 impeachment process was an informing of the public of a number of different things, some of which are more salacious, not morning talk. And then the second part would be to use that informing the public component to get the public to the point where they would want conviction. So impeachment is one part of it. And a lot of times impeachment in and of itself actually serves as a corrective, or the threat of impeachment serves as a corrective to aberrant behavior. So it's not necessarily about getting to conviction, removal, or as I've heard other people say, throwing Donald Trump in prison. It's about stopping bad behavior and creating a toxification process around bad behavior, like associating yourself with foreign adversaries and that sort of thing on a financial matter.
Chris, thanks for the call from Texas this morning. You mentioned the Clinton impeachment process. That also on the mind of Nancy Pelosi, according to that Washington Post magazine interview. Here's more from what she had to say. Pelosi has at times referenced the failed 1998 impeachment of President Bill Clinton by congressional Republicans as a formative experience in her thinking, an argument that she renewed in her interview last week. Quote, "There's no question that was horrible for the country. It was unnecessary and the rest. But in terms of where we are, as Thomas Paine said, the times have found us, and the times have found us now. We have a very serious challenge to the Constitution of the United States in the president's unconstitutional assault on the Constitution, on the first branch of government, the legislative branch." That another quote from that Washington Times piece that has garnered so much attention in the past 24 hours. Teresa is waiting in Red Bank, New Jersey. You're up next.
Hello.
Teresa, your thoughts on Speaker Pelosi's comments in that story?
Well, the impeachment thing, what is it, high crimes and misdemeanors? He has that, but we just don't have enough people to vote, right? And what I want to talk about is when he goes down to Mar-a-Lago, who pays for that? And what kind of security do they have down there? I don't understand how he can run down to that place in Florida that he goes to and have meetings. Do we pay for that every time he takes that big plane down there? There's so much going on in this White House. It's scary. It really is. And I worked for the Department of Defense for 30 years. I know how the security clearances go. There's a need to know. What does Jared and his wife have a need to know? That's how the clearances go. If you don't have a need to know, you don't really need one. So something is not right with that. Okay. Thank you.
Teresa in New Jersey, just about 10 minutes left as we talk to just Democrats only in this first 30 minutes of the Washington Journal today. Your responses, your reaction to Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying yesterday that she's not for impeachment when it comes to President Trump. Norman is in Catonsville, Maryland. You're up next. Go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. My thing is this here right here. I mean, I can't you look at the House Republicans and the House Democrats, and then you see the Senate. Now, nobody wants to impeach this guy. We know the Senate is not going to vote to impeach President Trump. However, I look at the public, okay? The public is the one who put these people in power. You got one side of the country, they're rooting for Donald Trump because of for whatever he's doing. But the lies that he tells on a day-to-day basis, these people who voted for him, they're the ones who don't even establish their own support to help to remove these type of people in office. Same thing with the Congress. Okay, those same people up there that the public votes for, put them there and allow these people to do whatever they do. So why you even put people there that's not going to really have your best interest at heart, who's not going to really look out and help you when you know you got a president and you got a Senate who is going to definitely shoot everything down and not going to allow anything to come up in there. So I'm just saying I can't look at those members. I got to look at the people who put them in office. You put them in office, you have to deal with whatever they deal to you. And if you keep putting people in office like that, this is what you're going to keep on getting. So all this impeachment business, that's a sham. That's a ruse. That's just, to me, it's BS. Bottom line, vote for better people to have a better future that's going to have your best interests at heart. All that other stuff is just nonsense.
Got your point. That's Norman in Catonsville, Maryland this morning. Norman mentioned House Republicans. Some House Republicans engaged Democrats on this issue of impeachment last night at a House Rules Committee hearing. Here's a bit of the back and forth.
I've kept very close attention to Mr. Nadler's statements on impeachment, and unfortunately, I have to tell you, he has never said he was for impeachment. He has specifically said he's not. He's just for oversight, for going down the road of letting the American public know what's happened during this administration. He has never said he was for impeachment. If he had, I would remember it well.
You apparently weren't on the Amtrak train. But nevertheless, I think the data that is being collected that Chairman Nadler is requesting, the fact that we're here talking about the Miller report that has not even been released yet, I think points in a general direction. You may think that Russia did something wrong in the last election, but let's be honest, you think President Trump did something wrong, and that something wrong was that he won an election that none of you expected him to win.
Was that a hypothetical question? He may think that Russia did something wrong. Are you not agreeing to that?
Look, the point is that the reason people are upset with the president is that he won an election that you did not think he could win. And we've heard that over and over again. You thought he could win?
Sir, I didn't think he could win, but that's not why I'm upset with him. I'm upset with him because of what he said about people who are fine people on both sides in Charlottesville. I'm upset with him because of what he said about Muslim people. I'm upset with him about what he said about women. I'm upset with him with his policies concerning children and their opportunities. I'm upset with him for saying that he didn't think Putin wouldn't have lied about interfering with our elections. I'm upset with him for so many other reasons, not with the fact that he won the election. I'm upset with the way he has served as president.
About 5 minutes left in this first segment of the Washington Journal. Just talking with Democrats only, getting your reaction to Speaker Pelosi saying yesterday that she's not for impeachment. Linda, Marks, Mississippi, you're next. Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Nancy Pelosi. There's other committees that's laying out the evidence that's with oversight. Richard Nixon was popular during Watergate until the tapes came out. Sane Americans, decent Republicans, went and told him he had to go. I'm hoping for decent and Republicans to stand up and get a spine and do what's best for the country. If they cannot, when the evidence is laid out, I think no Republicans should be led into leadership again, because they're not worshiping, they're not doing for the country. They're worshiping a man that's ignorant and embarrassing and just doing what's best for him and his family, to line his pockets. He cares nothing about the American people. When the evidence is laid out, Nancy's right. He would have to go. He would have to go if they have to drag his ass out of there.
That's Linda in Mississippi. This is Peggy in Washington. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I agree with Nancy Pelosi. No impeachment. We don't have the votes in the Senate. Why waste our time? We got bigger fish to fry. So let's move on from that. Thank you.
Just across the Potomac River in Virginia is Alexandria, Virginia. Gina's there. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well.
I agree with Nancy Pelosi. I trust her. And I also want all the Democrats to realize that if Trump gets elected a second term, there are statute of limitations on some of his crimes. We all need to stay focused and vote, because if he gets a second term, he's going to get away with a whole lot of stuff. And also, I want you to I watched this movie called A Time to Kill with Matthew McConaughey, and at the end, he told the jury, close your eyes. He walked them through all the crimes these people did, and at the end, he said, now imagine if she was white. I'm just saying, if he was a black president, it wouldn't be this crazy. It's, I believe in the justice system. I believe Mueller's doing a great job. I believe in Nancy Pelosi. Stay focused. Just stay focused and vote, and we're going to be fine.
Glenn is next in Illinois. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, I got a few little comments. Nancy ain't got the votes because what's his name ain't going to put anything in front of the Republicans in the Senate. And if you had your wife sitting next to Trump for $100,000 a year or better, would you put anything on the floor? I don't think I would. And now Jarrett just tried to get a loan from the housing authority for his 666 apartment building. And
Glenn, go ahead, finish your comment. We only have about 15 seconds left.
And Pence made a statement. Now, this I've seen just one time or a couple times the same day about reprogramming the gays, but that thing has just got washed under the rug somewhere.
That's Glenn in Illinois, our last caller in this first segment of the Washington Journal. But stick around, plenty more to discuss today, including coming up next, we'll talk to Congressman Al Green, one of the early voices calling for President Trump's impeachment. He'll be here to answer your phone calls this morning and later.
Washington Journal continues.
Texas Democratic Congressman Al Green is back at our desk. He's called for the impeachment of President Trump dating back to 2017. Congressman, this was Nancy Pelosi quoted in the Washington Post yesterday. "I'm not for impeachment," she said. "I've been thinking about this. Impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country and he's just not worth it."
Well, thank you for having me on. And I'm here today because I love my country. The words in the Pledge of Allegiance mean something to me, and I salute the flag, liberty and justice for all. And I believe that this is what impeachment is about. It's really about whether or not we are going to tolerate and continue to allow an unfit president to be in office. Let's just address the comments about, is he worth it? This is something I've heard before. This is not something new, whether the president is worth it. But it's really not about him. It's not about Democrats. It's about democracy. It's not about Republicans. It's about the republic. And the question that we really have to ask ourselves is whether the country is worth it, whether what we stand for is worth it, whether our values are worth it, whether we will allow an unfit president to continue to wreak havoc upon our society. Just a couple of more comments on this because it's very important. I want to deal with the myth that impeachment is comparable to a vote to go to war. People have said this. I go to the VA hospital annually. I know what the price of freedom looks like. Go to a VA hospital if you want to see the price of freedom. Ask a veteran who's lost a leg. Ask a veteran who's lost an eye. Ask a veteran who's been wounded whether or not impeachment is comparable to going to war. Going to war is about freedom and liberty and justice for all. Impeachment is a benefit that we have as a result of people who are willing to die for this country. So I refuse to allow Republicans who are recalcitrant and who've already decided that they won't impeach the president regardless of what he does. They've decided this. We didn't elect a majority of Democrats to the House to allow Republicans to determine the fate of the country. We are there for a reason, and there will be another vote on impeachment. Now, there's a way to stop me. If you desire to stop me, you but only have to change the rules so that I can't bring a vote on impeachment. Otherwise, I will, because the Constitution and the rules allow any one person to bring a vote on impeachment, and there is no necessity for this to go to a committee. If the president has committed impeachable acts, you can bring it to the floor.
What are the impeachable acts that you think he's committed?
Well, there are many. I talked about obstruction of justice initially, so I just mentioned a couple there. The president appears to be an unindicted co-conspirator. The president, we need to know. The president fired the person who was investigating his campaign to determine whether there was collusion with the Russians. Really conspiracy, but we'll use that term for public purposes. And those two things are worthy of our giving consideration to impeachment. But more important than these, quite frankly, is the whole notion that bigotry emanates from the presidency and his policies. His policies. S-whole countries talking about Africa, people of color, I might add. When he separates babies from their mothers, Liberty and justice for all doesn't mean just people who happen to live in the United States of America. Liberty and justice for all. When you separate babies from their mothers, and that's a policy, regardless as to what he says. When you take the idea, the whole notion that there were some very nice people among the bigots and the racists at Charlottesville, where a woman lost her life, I might add. An innocent, peaceful protester lost her life. When you look at what happened at Temple, the Tree of Life Temple, when you look at what happened at Mother Emanuel, when you look at people losing their lives in places of worship, bigotry is on the rise, and it will not subside by allowing Republicans to determine the actions of Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I will be guided by the actions of the people, not by the actions of the Republicans.
The first concerns you brought up about obstruction, we may or may not get more answers about that when the Mueller report comes out. Why not wait for calls for impeachment until after we see what's in the Mueller report?
Well, I've already said that I respect what Mr. Mueller is doing, but I've also said this. The framers of the Constitution never intended for the executive to investigate itself. Mr. Mueller is now a part of the executive. His report goes to the executive, which means it goes to the president. The framers never intended for this to be the case. The framers intended for those in the House of Representatives to have domain over impeachment. We in the House have to take up our responsibility. When Republicans were in control, I said that Republicans should do their job. Democrats are now in control. We have gained this large majority in the House, and we still say Republicans will determine the fate of our country. This is not about them. It's about the Republic, and we have to take a stand. This is where I stand.
When you were tweeting your response to Nancy Pelosi's statements yesterday, you used the hashtag impeachment is not dead. Are you concerned that Nancy Pelosi is trying to kill impeachment talk in your caucus?
I won't address Speaker Pelosi, but here's what I will address. There are opinion makers and opinion shapers who want to maintain the status quo. For them, bigotry is a talking point, not an action item. It's an action item for me. There's a moral imperative that trumps political expediency. For many people, bigotry in policy is but just a talking point. It's something that they use to get the base out. It's something that they use at election time. And those people who suffer from bigotry ought not depend on people who are going to use it as a talking point. It's time for people to decide, are we going to take on bigotry, or are we going to allow it to fester and grow? You don't eliminate bigotry by dealing with it in a politically expedient way. You have to take it head on. And we can do this. We were elected. We have a large majority in the House for a reason. And that reason is not to allow Republicans to continue to control the floor of the House of Representatives. By the way, there will be another vote. There will be another vote on it. I'm going to bring it to the floor of the House again. I know I'm the only person that's done it. I know that I'm the only person that's out here saying that what I'm saying to you now. But I also know this. Dr. King reminded us, when the arc of the moral universe is long, although it may be, you can bend it toward justice. That's what we're attempting to do, bend it toward justice. And I have something for you. I want to give you this. This is the letter that the people who were opposed to the freedom marches, opposed to people seeking justice, opposed to bigotry, this is the letter they wrote. These were prominent people who wrote this letter. 8 prominent people, members of the clergy, respectable people, opinion makers and opinion shapers, all who were of the opinion that this was not the right time. They went on so far as to say in their letter that we agree, rather, with certain local Negro leadership which has called for honest and open negotiation of racial issues in our area. So they wanted to negotiate their way out of something that the status quo wanted to maintain. Talking points, talking points. We have to get beyond talking points and have bigotry as an action item. And the one way that it will be an action item in the Congress of the United States of America is to have a vote. We will all go on record. Everybody do what you may. I don't believe that we should lobby people and whip people as we caption it in Congress. I think people ought to vote their convictions. History will be there to judge us all. Let's vote our convictions.
I'll let you chat with a few callers. If you want to join in the conversation, Democrats, it's 202-748-8000. Republicans, 202-748-8001. Independents, 202-748-8002. Jeffrey's up first from Auburn, New York, a Democrat. Go ahead.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. I come to you from the hometown of Harriet Tubman. I want to bring up a couple points which would lead to Trump resignation. The truth shall set you free. So the best option after the truth comes out for Trump is not impeachment. It's resigning in disgrace. Cheaters never win, and winners never cheat. I think the Electoral College cheated us out of an election this time. And the subterfuge from the Russians is a corrupting influence, but the Electoral College is a corruption of one man, one vote. And true democracy is one man, one vote. And I'll leave you with this. Jesus was a socialist.
Well, knowing the truth and the truth setting you free is John 8:32 from a Christian Bible. And one man, one vote is Baker versus Carr, case that went before the Supreme Court of the United States of America. But listen, my dear brother, this is not about the election that was lost. This is about the country that may be lost. This is about whether or not we are going to do the right thing at the right time. This is a righteous thing that we're doing. And Dr. King reminded us that the time is always right to do that which is right. What is amazing to me is that many of the status quo personalities will admit that he's unfit to be president, will admit that he's done things that are the equivalent of impeachable offenses, but will then turn and say, we don't want to upset our status quo. When the framers of the Constitution developed Article 2, Section 4, they did it knowing that there would be a time of turmoil when this happened. They knew that it would be partisan. Read the Federalist Papers. Read the words of Madison, Hamilton, and John Jay. Read what they said in Federalist 65 about what the times would be like. Times such as these, they were prophetic with their writings. And we ought to understand that this is the time that they wrote about, and Trump is the president that they spoke about.
Afton, Michigan is next. Charles, Republican, good morning.
Yes. Hello?
Go ahead, Charles. You're on with Congressman Green.
Yes. What is his reason for being in office?
Are you talking about the congressman, Charles?
Yes. What is his reason for being in office? What has he done for the United States?
Thank you for your call. I do appreciate the challenge, but my dear friend, my dear brother, this is not about me. It's about the Constitution. It's about whether or not we are going to stand on the righteous grounds that the framers of the Constitution provided for a time such as this and a president such as Trump, that the majority, overwhelming majority, if you want to get partisan, of Democrats agree that he is unfit and ought to be impeached. Overwhelming majority. Leadership may not. People do. Republicans, by an overwhelming majority, say that he should not be impeached. But it's not about them. It's about the country. Don't you see what's happening to our country, dear brother? Don't you see how there's strife among the people of the country? Don't you see the ugly head of bigotry has decided that it can not only rear its ugly head, but that it can do so proudly almost? This is a time for people to take a stand. This is a time for us to neither be the summer soldiers or the sunshine patriots. This is a time for us to take a stand.
Millersville, Maryland. David, Republican. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, C-SPAN. Good morning, America. I just have to say, Congressman, the level of BS coming out of here, it might work for your constituents, but on the national stage here, I don't even know what you're saying right now. you're saying bigotry, but that's a huge charge. And to go ahead and impeach somebody based on political leveraging, I mean, somebody has to study this in 15 or 30 years, and then you have to explain to someone why you impeach them, and there's no impeachable offense here. It's basically politics. That's why Pelosi said what she said yesterday, because you're going down a path and you're setting a precedent that now you have to own. And what is it based on? A report that was brought together because of opposition research and paid for by all these individuals, and then a special prosecutor was appointed to go and investigate, to dig up and what? And then all these documents that are being requested by the House committees to the executive branch. I mean, that could be opposition research, because now they say, well, there was collusion. Well, if the Democrats are worried about foreign interference in our election, then the first thing they should do is not allow non-citizens to dictate our leaders, which is pretty much what you do when you allow non-citizens to vote. I mean, there's no bigger action of collusion and or of allowing a foreign government to interfere with our election process than allowing non-citizens to vote.
Got your point, David. Congressman.
I gladly welcome the judgment of history. Time tells, history judges, and the truth will be known. I welcome the judgment of history, because history is going to show that there were some among us who stood up against the bigotry. And for those who contend that bigotry isn't worth it, tell that to the people who go to the polls believing that we're going to eliminate bigotry. Tell that to the people who support a given party because they believe that that party stands against bigotry. And also this, my dear brother, remember this. Andrew Johnson was impeached for speaking ill of Congress. Andrew Johnson, 1868, President of the United States, impeached for speaking ill of Congress. So, my dear brother, bigotry in policy is something that hurts many people in this country. And because many of us live in places where we don't encounter those who suffer, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned about their suffering. It doesn't mean that we should ignore what's happening to them. They vote for us. They put us in office. Yet we then make bigotry but nothing but more than a talking point. This is a sad set of circumstances when we conclude that it's not worth it to impeach a bigoted president who is causing harm to society, especially minorities in society, LGBTQ in society, those who have religious preferences that might be antithetical to his point of view in society, a Muslim ban, deciding that you're going to, for whatever reasons, ban people because of where they come from. Supreme Court taking that up, of course, but before that, it was shot down several times, had to carefully craft it and use sophisticated sophistry to make it work for you. This is a time for us to take a stand. If only a few do it, that'd be okay with me. History will judge us. And if I stand alone, I still stand. And for those who question the Democratic Party and Democratic leadership, I don't speak for them. I don't want anybody to think I speak for Democratic leadership. I do not. I speak for everybody that agrees with me, and that's 70 to 80% of the Democrats.
You talk about who you're standing with. Here's a headline from the Houston Chronicle from earlier this year. Houston Democrat Al Green joins with billionaire Tom Steyer in bid to impeach Trump. Can you talk about that work and your efforts together?
Well, I think very highly of Mr. Steyer. He has had the courage to move forward, but he's done something that I believe that merits our attention. He has put his money where his thoughts are, where his mouth is, to use an expression. And I think that his work has been meaningful and has been beneficial. I have said that I'm not going to pressure members into doing a given thing. I've said I won't go into their districts and would not encourage going into their districts, but I do think that his movement to bring impeachment to the forefront of the conversation is one that merits respect. And I think history is going to be very kind to Mr. Steyer because he took a stand in opposition to what I call the status quo opinion makers and opinion shapers. And by the way, thank you to C-SPAN for your 40th year of work, but it's also a platform for the loyal opposition to be heard. This is where the loyal opposition can be heard, on C-SPAN. 40 years of allowing the loyal opposition to be heard, because there are status quo opinion makers and opinion shapers who won't allow this conversation to take place. Okay with me, I'm going to continue to talk. I'll continue to go to the floor of the House of Representatives. I'll talk to people wherever I find them. And if in the final analysis we don't impeach, I will feel that I have done my duty to my country. That's what this is about. I started by saying I love my country. I meant it then, and I mean it now. I'm going to stand where I stood when I first announced that we would take up the articles of impeachment, as we will again. Everybody will go on record.
Westville, New Jersey is next. Maria, Independent, good morning.
Good morning, John and the Congressman.
Good morning.
I just have a couple of points. There was someone who called up and said this is a democracy, it's a democratic republic, and that means that it's not mob rule. I feel that there's double standards here. Mr. Trump, for all of his faults, denounced the Nazis that marched, and he was talking about people who still wanted the statues up. He was not talking in favor of the Nazis. And he was making a New York type of joke about send more things on Hillary. I wish he would, tone that down, but let's try to be fair. I think subversion is a very impeachable offense. Let's start with some officials who are permitting people to come over the border, who favor illegal aliens over our people. Let's start with La Raza, which thinks that everybody's a nativist and we all have white privilege. There's bigotry in every race, and I think we ought to look to Mr. Obama's records, which are sealed up about his education. And in other words, let's examine everybody.
I think everybody should be examined. I'm not opposed to it. But the tone and tenor of this starts at the top. And the top in our country is the President of the United States. The presidency is where it begins. And if you have bigotry and policy emanating from the presidency, that has to be dealt with. Those people at the border who are seeking asylum are comporting themselves properly with the law. The law in this country says that they can do exactly what they're doing. If the president doesn't like that law, he had the House, he had the Senate, he had the presidency, and probably a majority on the Supreme Court. He could but only have changed the law. He did not change the law. He chose to separate families. We had 12 million people to come through Ellis Island. 12 million, the Statue of Liberty. Give me your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. 12 million. Nobody was separated. There was no family separation at Ellis Island. When they came through Ellis Island, there was not a flotilla out there in the harbor to prevent people from coming into Ellis Island. I'm not saying to you that everybody that says I want asylum should get it. I'm saying to you it's the law. We conveniently want to support the law when it supports our ideology. But when it is antithetical to it, we then want to disregard the law. The law says it can be done, change the law. Don't like impeachment, change the Constitution. Article 2, Section 4 is as good today as it was the day the Constitution was put into place.
Less than 5 minutes left. Anne's been waiting in New York City. A Democrat, go ahead.
Yes. Aside from Mr. Trump being the most unethical and immoral president we've ever had, he paid hush money before the election to influence the American voter. He had Russian dealings that he lied to the American voter about. He has the emoluments violations that he has violated. And I wonder how Nancy Pelosi is going to feel when he pardons Manafort and Stone and Flynn and all the rest of his cronies.
Well, thank you. But I've consistently said this is not about the Speaker. It's really about our democracy, and it's not about Republicans, it's about our republic. And I am going to continue my effort. I will have a press conference at 9 o'clock a.m. in my office on Capitol Hill, the Raymond Office building. The press is welcome to come in. We'll see if the press will cover it and to what extent it will be covered. But I'll have a press conference so that I can answer questions from the press. I ought to be challenged. People ought to confront me. They ought to give me their best thoughts, and I ought to have the opportunity to respond. So if people don't come, it's because they don't want to challenge me. But I ought to be challenged. This is a crisis in our country. It is a crisis that goes beyond political expediency. Political expediency would say, let's just get back to bigotry as usual. You see, Mr. Trump has taken us out of bigotry as usual, where it is camouflaged, where it is covert as opposed to overt. Mr. Trump has made bigotry overt. We want to get back to bigotry as usual. I want to eliminate bigotry. I don't want to manage it. I don't want to have it such that we can use it for political opportunities. I want to eliminate bigotry, not manage bigotry. I want to make sure that we deal with the moral imperative to impeach an unfit president for the harm that he's causing to our society.
You forced a vote back in December of 2017 in the House on whether to move forward with impeachment. It was defeated 364 to 58. You did it again in January 2018. That was defeated as well by wide margins. When do you think you'll be able to force another vote on this topic?
The acid test is one that does not carry with it a specific date. There will be another vote. I cannot at this time announce it, or I will not at this time announce it, but there is an acid test that I have. And I would also add this. If the vote had been 434 to 1, my position would still be the same, because I'm standing on the righteous ground of what the framers of the Constitution intended and what the Pledge of Allegiance demands, liberty and justice for all. I believe in my country. I salute the flag. I say the Pledge of Allegiance. I believe in America. And if America is to be the America that it should be for every American, we have to pursue this course.
Less than 2 minutes left this morning. Terry's waiting in Woodbridge, Illinois. Thanks for waiting. Republican, go ahead.
Yes, I want to say something to Al Green, but it's only 2 short comments, so please don't cut me off. First of all, I'd like to say amen, brother, to the guy from Maryland. For Al Green, racist and bigotry would never leave because of people like you. And number 2, the Democrats must learn to accept an election. They must learn how to be good losers. And he hadn't done nothing yet proven for you to impeach him. Everybody would say, oh, don't fire Mueller, don't fire Mueller. Well, he didn't do it. Now you're not even waiting for the report to come out, and you got all these phony investigations going on. So,
give you the last minute, Congressman.
Thank you. Again, it's not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about our democracy. It's about our republic. And it's about whether or not we will do what we know is the right thing pursuant to the Constitution, given that people who say we shouldn't impeach will admit that he's unfit and that he's committed impeachable acts. I thank C-SPAN for the opportunity. It is a platform where the loyal opposition can be heard, and that ought to mean something to people in this country. Whether you agree with me or not, you ought to agree that the loyal opposition ought to be heard. And in time, I will be proven to be right that we should impeach, because there is no requirement of a crime to impeach. Harm to society is the standard that we must adhere to, the one in the Constitution. If we respect the Constitution, we respect impeachment. Thank you again, C-SPAN. 40 years of providing a platform for the loyal opposition.
Appreciate your time. We'll talk again down the road.
Thank you.
Up next.